What did you think about that video? Did you think Dawkins had a point, or do you think that he was just an elitist snob, essentially saying, don't worry about it, we'll take care of things for you. You guys just go over there and watch the Kardashians, and someone else will take care of all these big boy problems for you. That's an interesting conversation to be had, because the truth of the matter is even though I have a doctorate in this, I'm not an expert in a lot of the stuff that happens. So why should I have a say in what's going on? And then I think about people who don't even really care about these things. They are part of that. So, in other words, it's the question of, do the elites run things, and also the question of, should the elites run things? And I don't really know. So here's elitism. Elitism is essentially this idea that a minority group, the ruling elite, and when I say the ruling elite, I don't mean like the nobility or anything like that, but like politicians. You could also add in this probably the wealthier. They hold the power of the state. Or you could even add to this ruling elite people who really care about these issues, like people who are the heads of interest groups, or people who are in think tanks, or people that spent their life sort of thinking about these things, that they're the ones who should be making these policies. So if pluralism is policies is essentially the competition between these groups, that's still true for elitism, except that it's groups within the elite. The important policy struggles are between groups within the elite. And so by the time it gets to us, normal people who aren't the elite, a lot of the decisions have been made. Not that it's sort of this or it's not that the decision's been made, but the decision has been sort of narrowed down from 1,000 different possibilities to 2 or 3 possibilities. And then you're choosing between those 2 or 3 things. Like the Republicans want this, the Democrats want this. There's not a lot of nuance there. I'm either pro-Republican or pro-Democrat, or I don't care. That's kind of how that then ends up being. In fact, this really works on the idea that if the belief is that it's harmful if the people try to do this in the place of the elite. Again, the people aren't well informed under this way of thinking about things, and they are a little, I guess you could say, wishy-washy. Like one day we want this, the next day we want that. And so just let the elite do these things. That's the idea, is that if pluralism really was the case, it would actually be harmful to the society. That's elitism here. So now this doesn't mean the elites can do whatever they want, just run around and just skim off money for themselves. They still have to meet people's needs, or the people will replace them. So it is still a democracy. It's not an authoritarian government. So the elites are still limited in these ways. They can't just talk about whatever they want to talk about. At the same time, they can, as long as they're meeting people's needs at the same time. So some useless or mythical terms, some things that we think about when we think about democracy. If you are in this elitist camp, if you think this is how things are done or should be done, here's some terms that are, I guess you could say, mythical or just not very relevant. Egalitarianism, that essentially everybody's equal. That's not exactly true. Before in a court of law, I should be the same as Bill Gates. On election day, I should still have the same electoral power as Bill Gates. But we both know that that's not true. We all know that that's not true. Another mythical term would be the will of the people. Like, okay, who's the people? What exactly do the people want? Okay, now we know what the people want. 5 minutes go by. Now what do the people want? I mean, how do you actually measure what the will of the people is from moment to moment, particularly on issues that the people in general just don't care that much about? Like, there's a lot of issues that show up in the newspaper that we really care about. We follow the public policy of, say, healthcare. We follow the public policy right now of coronavirus. But honestly, there are tons of public policy decisions that they don't make the paper because nobody would read about them. So, for example, do we want to move corn subsidies from, $15 a bushel to $14.50 a bushel? You really care? I mean, honestly, if I'm a corn farmer, I care. But the rest of us, who cares? And that's sort of the idea here, is that there really isn't a people to have will on a lot of these things. One more mythical term that the elitists say is that government by the people is also a mythical term. That essentially the people can't do government any more than a large group of friends can decide where to go eat. Usually what ends up happening is somebody just says, we're going to go eat here. If you want to come, come. That's the same general idea, is that human beings just don't make decisions in groups very well. And leaders arrive, and that's what we call this ruling elite. That's elitism here. That's the idea. As you can see over here, why does Congress ignore Americans? And one of the big reasons is money. They want my vote, but they also want the money from this corporation. So who's going to get more attention, me or, again, if I go knock on my senator's door and Bill Gates knocks on the senator's door, who's more likely to get in? That is sort of this idea of whether you want it to be or not, it's elitism. That's the argument here. Now, I'm not saying this is true. I'm just saying this is the argument of elitism, which leads us to politics then. If politics for the pluralist, I got to find my old notes here. I moved things around. For the pluralist, politics is the competition between groups for influence. Here, for elitism, politics is the competition between elites rather than groups for the votes of a passive electorate. Again, passive meaning we'll just vote and then we'll basically step out of this until the next election. We're not really asked what we want until the next election. We don't really say what we want till the next election. We just sort of, we elect Donald Trump, and then 4 years later, we're going to elect somebody else. And that's sort of the role of the electorate. Again, for elitism. For pluralism, it's very, very different. That's the idea here. So voters don't really get to freely choose their representatives, nor should they under this argument. So let me just give you an example. Back in 2004, I'm just picking this one. 2004, the presidential election was between George W. Bush for the Republicans and John Kerry for the Democrats. Both of these guys were male. Both of these guys were rich. Both of these guys were white. Both of these guys attended Yale University. So here's the thing. You're not sort of allowed to choose who you want to choose. It's selected for you. And honestly, it's selected by the elites for you. So you'll get to choose between A or B, but that is a choice. A is put on the list and B is put on the list because of these guys right here. So yes, you get a choice, but is it a free choice? Not really. And that's a good thing, because you would probably, not you, who would the people elect? I mean, who are the popular people? Go look at the stuff on, TikTok, and go look at the stuff on Instagram, and who will the people select to lead? The people might be a little weird about that. So, it's sad I can't even think of a TikTok person right now. Was that D'Amelio? What's her name? Does all those weird dance things. She should be our next Secretary of Defense. That sounds like a good call right there. Now here's the thing. Does this model of how democracy works, does this contradict liberalism? Again, remember what liberalism is. I get to choose my own good life. From the elitist model, again, we're not talking about a dictatorship. This is not a dictatorship by the elites. The elites still have to please the people, so it's still a democracy. The answer is no. The purpose of government is to protect liberalism from the whims of the people, that the people would be saying, let's do this. Oh, let's do this. Now let's do this over here. Oh, this is cool. Let's do this over here. And what government then does for an elitist model is it protects the government from being sort of swung around by this so that we can continue to have your ability to choose your own good life. Only a strong group of the best can do this, and this is what we call the elites. The people then have the ability to replace certain elites, but it cannot replace the ruling class as a whole. Now, that's a really narrow definition of liberalism, but I'll just ask you guys this, now that we kind of have these two models. Which one of these models do you think, so two things. Number one, which one of these models do you think should be the case, and which one of these models do you think actually does a better job of representing what actually is the case. Is it a pluralist model or is it an elitist model? How the government in the United States or wherever your country is that how it actually works? And is that what we mean when we say democracy? Okay, so we're going to take a little second here. You're going to watch a video and then we will come back.